Oh, hi, Mark. I didn't even expect or plan on making this video tonight, honestly. I was gonna make another shelf by shelf video, but okay. I'll go with an unexpected review. That's kind of been the tune of my reviews lately. I just kind of pop a movie and realize about halfway through the movie, like, I think I want to review this movie. So, um, anyway, the movie that I'm here to review tonight is Sledgehammer. This is a 1983 shot-on-video slasher film directed by David A. Pryor. Who I guess is a pretty, fairly big name in the shot-on-video horror section. If you can call anyone from there a big name. But yeah, I had seen this film once before, but I don't know, I didn't remember it very well, and so I wanted to go back and watch it again. Figure I own it, why the hell not? And it was fun. Obviously it's a shot-on-video horror film, and so I'm not gonna sit here and lie to you guys and tell you that it's good, but it's fun. So we have this cast of characters. Honestly, I only remember one of their names, and that's because he was my favorite. I remember John. He's this really giant guy, this really giant buff guy with this big Grizzly Adams beard, and guy was funny. And he was funny, and he was unintentionally funny in a couple of parts because he was, he got scared at one point in the film when they were trying to play a prank on him, and he got all butthurt when they called him out for being scared. So that's the only reason why I remember his name. Like, that's the only thing that made him memorable to me, was because he was funny. But anyway, this cast of what I'm sure is supposed to be 20-somethings. A couple of them looked like they were at least 30. That's fine. That's kind of the standard for horror films in the 80s. Like, 20-somethings, teenagers, doesn't matter. You can get anyone to just, hey, how old are you? 35. You could pull off 19. I think that I think we can make that happen. So, I mean, it's pretty bad, but it was fun. And so we have this cast of 20-somethings, like I said, going to this cabin in the woods. They never explain this cabin in the woods. It's just kind of there, I guess. Maybe it's an abandoned cabin, or maybe it's a rented cabin. I don't know. And then I think we get an excuse as to why they aren't able to drive away. And it had something to do with their van. I think their van was going to be fixed up while they were there or something. I really don't know. The storyline of this movie is pretty forgettable. We do have a couple of solid kills in this movie, which is strange, but this movie is a mixed bag for kills. The first kill that I remember in the film, because I'm sure the mother character from the very beginning, from this forced kind of mushed together backstory that they just kind of were like, alright, this backstory makes sense, right? Alright, that's the backstory we're gonna give it. And they didn't put any more thought into it than that. But this mother from that backstory, I'm sure I know she dies in the flashback sequences and the beginning sequence, but I don't remember how. From what I remember, even though I don't remember, her death was fairly forgettable, which is why I don't remember it, if that made any sense whatsoever. But her boyfriend, or her lover, as this movie calls him, his death was pretty good, actually. It's a really simple sledgehammer strike to the back of the head, but the effect is pretty cool. Like, it smacks in the back of his head and his skull like splits open. You can see some brain. And that effect is pretty good. But the best kill in this movie is the first lot of the 20-somethings that end up going to this cabin later on. It's the first death of them, and this guy gets stabbed in the neck, like right here, and the knife goes all the way through, and the killer's like holding on to the other side of the knife. And of course we don't see the knife as the killer's holding on to it, because the killer's holding on to it. But later we do get a shot of his dead body with the knife stuck all the way through his neck, and it's coming out the other side. And I'm pretty sure he was even like the killer had put some wire around the knife and like hung him by the knife, which is pretty neat. And that is by far the best kill in this movie. It doesn't get better than that in this film. In fact, it gets much worse. Some of the kills in this movie are terrible. There's one where this guy he hits him right in the chest, like almost right in the sternum with a sledgehammer, and just red ends up all over this guy's chest, and there's this really obvious cut, like this really obvious edit right there, so they could get the red on his chest, and it's absolutely ridiculous. But before the killing starts, we have some ridiculous scenes. And the first scene kind of in the cabin is just this jumble of talking, just like it would be, I guess, if this group of friends went to the cabin and they were all talking over each other, trying to, talk to one another. And I genuinely couldn't hear most of it. Like, maybe I could, but maybe I wasn't paying close enough attention. But the only line of dialogue I remember from that entire first sequence in the cabin was John's line of dialogue, and he says, "You want to see a real man?" in a really deep, manly voice. And then directly after, he said, "I want to make sure this is right, so I'm going to be looking at my notes, which are right behind the phone here. You can ride side saddle on my horsey any day, Snookums." And as he says this, he walks up to the guy. Well, before he says this, he walks up to the guy and he takes the guy's hat off, and he leans into the guy like he's gonna kiss him, and he puts the hat in front of his face and the other guy's face, and he makes kissy sounds, and he steps back, and then he says that line, "You can ride side saddle on my horsey any day, Snookums," which is the most amazing thing in this movie. Genuinely. If you need more reason than that to watch Sledgehammer, that is one of the most hilarious lines in an 80s slasher movie ever. But on top of that first scene where it's just them talking over each other and them drinking a lot and etc., etc., there's just all of these ridiculous party scenes spliced together that they're so bad. Like, they aren't believable. Like, this is what you envision. I want to say as an older person, but more as an introvert in general. Especially since I'm not an older person. So I wouldn't know, but as an introvert, I suppose. This is what you imagine obnoxious parties are like. Like this is the most ridiculous, I want to say caricature, but that's not exactly a correct term since we're not talking about a person. But it really is kind of a caricature in a different sense of what you would think an obnoxious party full of obnoxious 20-somethings would be like. It's just all these stupid jackasses howling and going, woo, yeah! And, maybe music? I don't even remember if there was music. I really don't. And drinking. And encouraging each other to drink. Like, it's just super obnoxious. And it is very bad, very unbelievable, and that happens a few times. And it's not something that really annoys me, because I understand you gotta you gotta do something when the killer's not on screen, and that's what they were doing. Throughout this film as well, they use various techniques to pad the runtime, and they don't hide it either. They don't hide it very well. What I mean by this is there's probably 4 prolonged scenes in this film, maybe 3 or 4 prolonged scenes in this film where a slow motion technique is used just to pad runtime, which is completely ridiculous. I mean, and it comes across as super obvious as well. And not only is slow motion used, but then we also have repeats of the same scene. There is a scene in the beginning of the film that kind of explains the killer's origins. It doesn't really explain it. It's just kind of like, here's a segment of the killer's life. It doesn't explain how the killer's back or anything like that. But yeah, I mean, it's a scene in the beginning of the movie, and it replays like twice throughout the film, almost in its entirety. And so, I mean, that was obviously to pad runtime. And so between the two of those, you probably got a few minutes out of that. And it's very funny that they were trying to pad runtime, because this movie, it says it's 85 minutes. I can't imagine that that's actually accurate, though. I wonder if that includes credits. Because watching this movie, it really did fly by. And it's not because it was such a good movie. It has to be. It has to be that this movie is just over an hour. I couldn't imagine it being longer than just over an hour. But yeah, so that happens. It's a little obnoxious. And it is so in your face, obvious about the fact that they are doing this just to pad runtime. Like, it's not important scenes that are in slow-mo. They don't really replay the beginning scene for any real reason other than, again, to pad runtime. There is one scene where you could argue that they use slow motion to build suspense, but other than that scene, nothing. I mean, there really is no reason for the slow-mo. And then, other scenes include a scene where John, the you can ride side saddle on my horsey any day Snookums guy, where he eats a sandwich absurdly quickly. Like, that guy must have been a competitive eater in real life, because he chows this thing down. It's redonkulous. I couldn't imagine trying to do that. Like, you would choke. There is no way. There's no, obviously there's a way because he did it, but it's ridiculous. And then that is directly followed by a food fight, which is stupid and ridiculous. A bunch of grown-ass adults having a food fight. It's so dumb. Like, in concept, it's dumb. The scene is fun. But it doesn't make it any less dumb that these grown-ass adults are having a food fight. But then that scene is followed by, like, a scene where all the guys are standing around the table, and one of the guys telling some sexual sort of story, and then it cuts to the girls upstairs, and they're gossiping about their guys and their sex lives, and etc., etc. Lots of dialogue. Very dialogue heavy, because this movie didn't have the friggin' budget for anything else, I tell you what. And then, of course, another scene that is kind of there. There is a seance scene, and it's terrible. I mean, this seance scene is bad. First of all, like, directly after the guy says, I want to do seance, they all sit around in the dark and listen to this guy tell the origin story, which comes across as, like, the most ridiculous sort of information vomit to the audience that you've ever heard in your life. But it's weird because it's not even like information vomit. By the way, if you can't tell, I'm using the words information and vomit because I can't currently think of what that's called, which is ridiculous because I know that word. I don't know, man. I'm just gonna keep using information vomit. I can't think of it. I can't think of it at the time. I'm kind of tired, but which is strange because it's not exposition. There we go. It's not exactly exposition because we have that information. All of this information that he's telling us in this scene, we have. So it's almost like this scene is only there for the benefit of his friends, who he's telling the story to. So it doesn't really make any sense why that scene is so long. And then directly after that is the seance, which, by the way, he said, yeah, we're going to do a seance. And then they shut the lights off. And they all sit down in front of him like they're in the first grade and he's about to read them a story. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And even when they're doing the seance, they're still sitting like that. Like, just because you have lit candles and you're trying to talk to spirits, doesn't mean you're gonna be successful, bro. Like, I don't necessarily even believe that seances work. You know, like, I'm not one of them people that's super superstitious or, you know, very I don't not believe in ghosts, but I don't really believe in them either. It's kind of neutral ground in my head. But, yeah, like, if a seance were to ever work, this is what I'm trying to say. If a seance were to ever work, it would not work in this context. Because you have candles lit and you're trying to address the spirits directly doesn't mean that it's gonna work. I don't know where this guy... I don't know what seance school this man went to, alright? But then after the story, it's very silly. The whole seance scene is so ridiculous and so silly. Like, he's standing there in front of everyone, and they're still sitting there like they're in first grade, and he's gonna read them a story. He's gonna read to them about the Indian in the cupboard, or I don't know, To Kill a Mockingbird. What do kids in the first grade read? That doesn't matter. Anyway, and he starts just going, spirits, are you here? I'm calling upon you. Please manifest yourselves. And I probably acted that scene better than he did, by the way. It's so ridiculous. Like, he's like, I command you, spirits. I command you. And then, of course, he's trying to play a joke on his friends. So one of his buddies slips upstairs and goes to this boombox where they had this pre-recorded voice. And it's like, how dare you command me? And it all sounds super fake and super phony and super funny. Like, you couldn't fool a 6-year-old with this stuff. I swear to God, a 6-year-old would spit in your face if you tried this with them. It's hilarious. But all the grown-ass adults in this scene fall for it. Yeah, that scene's terrible, but it is pretty funny. And so those are basically the scenes outside of all of the chase scenes and kill scenes with the killer. Because then we get all the kill scenes and the chase scenes. And by the way, something else that happens in this movie a few times, which is a pretty stupid nitpick, but I'm gonna mention it anyways, because I always find it funny when I notice something like this in movies. We see the shadow of the boom mic a few times. To the sound guy's credit, we never see the boom mic, but we see the shadow of the boom mic several times, which I thought that was pretty funny. And by the way, the killer in this movie, this is my best description of the killer in this movie. He looks like a deranged version of Shelley from Friday the 13th Part 3 if he was taking steroids. I kid you not, that is exactly what he looks like. That being said, he is scary. The killer in this is scary. Like, it sounds funny when I put it that way, but I only mean that because of the curly hair that he has, and the mask that he's using looks very similar to a mask that Shelley uses at one point in Friday the 13th Part 3 to scare someone. But this guy, the guy who played the killer in this film, Doug Mattley, is the guy's name. He is 6'7". 6'7" Doug Mattley. Man, this guy is a beast, and he looks terrifying in this movie. He does have this weird mask on, and I don't know, you could maybe see it as silly, and of course the killer design is very silly, because it's just this really tall guy with a mask on that's wearing a flannel shirt and some jeans. I'm pretty sure the flannel shirt was even tucked into the jeans, which is pretty funny. Like, a killer's just gonna take the time to tuck his flannel shirt into his jeans. Doesn't matter. But this guy is huge, 6'7". So every time he's on screen, John, the character I mentioned earlier, he's a big guy. He's tall when compared to the rest of the cast. And Doug Mattley towers over him. Every single time he's in a hallway or in a door frame, he just fills the hallway or he fills the door frame to the point where it's like there's no getting around this guy. Like, even if you could jump over him, like, even if somehow that were physically possible, you could not jump over him because there's not enough space between his head and the door frame. And that part is actually really crazy and really cool. Doug Mattley as the killer in this is awesome. Yeah, and then we just kind of we get the 6'7" menacing awesome killer let people go, sorta. Like, he kills a lot of them, and then there's two of them that just kind of get to walk away. And because at first we are led to believe that they killed him, that they killed the killer. He got stabbed, he had a cleaver in his shoulder here. Couple of different things happen to this guy. Oh yeah, the final guy, not the final girl, because there are actually two survivors in this movie, the guy and the girl. But the final guy bops him in the face with his own sledgehammer, and so we're led to believe that kills him. Well, now there is a final shot of them walking out the door of this cabin in the woods, and they're gonna go down the mountain and get help and live happily ever after or whatever. But then the camera shows us in one of the windows up top, the killer is still alive. I mean, this killer is a ghost. There is no other explanation for how he would have moved around the house like he did. Like, he is straight up teleporting. He is Jason from Friday the 13th Part 8 teleporting. There's no hiding that this guy is indeed teleporting. So, I mean, he's not dead. So realistically, he did just let them go. Did it hurt your pride that he hit you in the face with your own sledgehammer? I don't get it. Like, what about that screamed they won? Like, the killer is still alive. I guess probably the killer is attached to the house in some way, shape, or form. That's probably what it is as far as why he didn't go out the door after them. But I'm talking about before they even left. I feel like that shouldn't have been how the movie ended. I just feel like this giant of a killer ghost should have snuck up behind him and, like, took off both their heads with the sledgehammer in one fell swoop and just knocked him off. Again, Jason Takes Manhattan style. But instead of uppercutting them, he just one fell swoop just across both of them. But of course that doesn't happen, and they walk away and the movie ends. So guys, at the end of the day, this movie's fun. If you like your shot on video trashy sort of movies, you're gonna like this movie. If you like bad horror movies and bad slasher movies, you're gonna like this movie. If you don't, you won't. It's really that simple. Myself, I do. I am very accustomed to watching garbage, so a movie like this isn't really that bad to me. It is, I understand that it's bad on a technical level, but it isn't, this movie isn't boring to me. This movie, like I said, it flew by. It really did. And so I have to keep that in mind when rating it. At the end of the day, I will say that Sledgehammer 1983 is probably going to get a generous rating of 5 out of 10. I would say a 5 is a generous rating of Sledgehammer. And again, I give it that because I find this movie amusing. I find it pretty humorous and fun in a lot of the scenes. There's rarely a moment where I'm just bored and so done with it that I'm like, all right, stop, okay? We get it. End the movie. And that's always, like, my measure of boredom. Like, if I'm at any point going, all right, I understand. You gotta end. You gotta stop. Then, like, that's something worth mentioning. This movie never had a moment like that, other than maybe, like, the party moments where I was like, all right, yeah, I get it. I get it. Obnoxious partying. But, I mean, it wasn't because I was bored. It was just because the partying was obnoxious. So I will give this a 5 out of 10. And I will say, if you are a fan of that type of movie, check out Sledgehammer from 1983. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching if you made it to the end. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.